Hello and welcome to Press TV's News Analysis. I'm Marcia Hashimi. Thank you for staying with us right here at Press TV. Well, what happens when debt exceeds income? And if you spend more money than you make by borrowing on your credit card each pay period, eventually you would go bankrupt. It sounds pretty straightforward and pretty obvious, but this is the reality of the U.S. economy.
The U.S. economy is facing one of the most devastating downturns in its history. Even though some believe the worst may be over, there are those who still believe the trend is downwards.
What's your outlook for 2011? You're painting a fairly big doomsday scenario by these notes. I mean, everything in here except for the world coming to an end.
The dollar closed out the year very, very weak. I think that continues in 2011. A weakening dollar is going to put more upward pressure on commodity prices that are already rising. It's going to put more upward pressure on interest rates, and it's going to force the Fed to make a very difficult decision. Aggressively start to tighten and let the chips fall where they may, or to try to postpone the pain. They keep on printing, and they unleash an even greater economic disaster.
The U.S. Census Bureau reports that some 47 million Americans live in poverty. That's 1 out of every 7 people in the country. The poverty line for African Americans and Latinos are 3 times that of white Americans. And the unemployment rate among African Americans is near 1930s depression levels. Meanwhile, the middle class in the U.S. is shrinking, but the latest data shows millionaires in the country will enjoy an increase in wealth by nearly 225% by 2020. Payroll processor ADP reports that U.S. companies added less than 180,000 jobs last month, far fewer than economists had anticipated. The official jobless rate rose to 9% from 8.8% last month. But this does not include discouraged workers or those who want full-time work. Counting in these factors, the real unemployment rate shoots up well above 16%.
Long-term unemployment in the current economy is the worst, really, the worst it's been in the post-war period. Currently, something like 45% of all the unemployed have been unemployed for 6 months or longer. And we know the consequences of that can be very distressing, because people who are out of work for a long time, their skills tend to atrophy. They lose contacts with the labor market, with their other people working the networks that they've built up.
Washington has admitted that a prolonged job crisis in the country has created the worst long-term unemployment since World War II. The U.S. is also facing a slowdown in its overall real gross domestic product. GDP grew by just 1.8% in the first quarter compared to the same period last year. Economists were expecting a growth rate of more than 3%. America remains the only developed nation to have seen a significant rise in its budget deficit. Recently, the Standard & Poor's rating agency downgraded the U.S. credit outlook from stable to negative. This sounds the alarm bell for the world's largest economy, which has had to spend billions of dollars on its war strategies in recent years and at the same time grapple with its worst financial downturn since the 1920s.
I'd like to welcome my guests to the program. From Beirut, Mr. Eugene Dabos, Chairman of Political Science Department, Notre Dame University. And from Irvine, California, Mr. Paul Sheldon Foote, Professor, California State University. And from Paris, financial journalist Max Kaiser. Welcome, all of you, to the program. Let me start off in Beirut. Now, Mr. Dabos, in a very simple way, what exactly is going on in the United States? We hear more and more and every day that the economy is on its way to recovery, but statistics and reality of life really points to something different. What's your take on that?
Well, I think when you ask what's going on, it depends who you ask. If you would ask the Obama administration, they would probably put the blame with the Republican Party and their unwillingness to cooperate in necessary economic reforms. Of course, if you'd ask the Republicans, or even more to the extreme right, the Tea Party, you would say that it's the deficit itself that's causing the problem. I think when we've seen this kind of problem over the last 100, 150 years in the U.S., it was active federal government investments and leadership in the economy that turn things around, or you waited for it to bottom out, which is obviously something that's not going to be possible in this day and age.
Okay, now, Mr. Foote, let me get you in on this. Now, the U.S. excuse me, the U.S. debt is over $14 trillion. What exactly does that mean for the country and for the average American?
It has meant a tremendous negative impact on average Americans because the federal government does not dare to permit interest rates to go up. If the interest rates in this country go up, then they couldn't pay the interest payments on the massive amount of debt. And so the average American who in the past depended upon savings accounts for safe investments no longer has that option because interest rates are nearly zero in those savings accounts. So average Americans have been paying very dearly for this.
Okay, and Max Keiser, let me get you in on this. Now, President Barack Obama, when he was running for the office, he promised that he was going to deal with those responsible for the financial crisis, and yet he brought many of those who caused the problems on board in his administration and really has not dealt with it at all. Why do you think this is the case, Max?
Well, he's being held captive by Ben Bernanke and Timothy Geithner in Wall Street. And as far as the jobs picture goes, when you ask Ben Bernanke to explain his policies, he doesn't include jobs. He doesn't include wages. He doesn't look at jobs. He doesn't look at wages to determine what he should do as far as his policies going forward. He sees a problem of deflation, so he keeps interest rates low.
Let me switch back to Beirut. Now, Mr. Davos, 1 in every 7 Americans now live below the poverty line. Is that a surprising statistic for you? And why do you think that this is the case that's happening in the world's largest economy?
Well, I think something that Max Keiser said is very significant, namely the issue of wages and employment. In order to drive this, you need, first of all, not only an active federal government, you also need the social partners. And organized labor in the U.S. has been on the defense for many decades. And a lot of people had hoped that the Obama administration would hark back to the Johnson and Kennedy administrations, or even further back to the Roosevelt administrations, where labor unions were given the same rights they would have in any other industrialized democracy. Obviously, this seems not to be the case. If we do not have an increase in incomes, if we don't have strong and vibrant labor organizations, you're going to have a reallocation of wealth to the top, and the middle and lower income population is going to get poorer and poorer. And this is also going to then decrease the amount of demand, and it'll be a spiral downwards for the majority of the population. I think the Obama administration has to make a decision. Are they a Democratic Party, or are they a second, more mild version of the Republican Party?
Well, what's your take on that? I mean, so far, 2 years into the administration, do you see a stark difference between Obama and his policies in dealing with the economy and former President George W. Bush's and his administration?
There's a huge difference in the policies. There's a big difference between the policies on the one hand and his ability to deliver on the other. I think his desire to negotiate and dialogue with Republicans is the major problem. The Republicans are unified. They're able to fight and force through their agenda. The Democrats are not doing this. Even when they had the majority in both houses, a very, very solid majority in both houses, they weren't able to deliver on the campaign promises they made in the congressional elections and the presidential elections. So the policies are good. I would say the willingness, I wouldn't even say the ability, the willingness to fight for them is very weak.
Okay, well, let me get Max Keiser back in on this. I think we've reestablished a connection. What's your take on that, Max? Do you feel that the policies of the Obama administration are actually good policies? They're just they're not able to deliver on a lot of their economic promises and policies?
Well, what's interesting is that, as I said before, Wall Street is running the show, and anytime the administration tries to reform Wall Street will crash the market. It was a year ago today we had the notorious flash crash. That was engineered to get Congress to defer any reform of Wall Street. Remember Hank Paulson, to get $750 billion in 2008. He engineered a crash of the stock market. And right now, you see tremendous volatility in markets over the past few days as a precursor to Ben Bernanke announcing probably another huge round of quantitative easing to keep interest rates as low as they possibly can to feed the speculators. So this is the problem Obama has. Anytime he tries to put forward a policy to reform the system or to do something for increasing wages, Wall Street crashes the system. They have the computer power to do so. They hold a gun to Obama's head and they say, give us what we want or we'll crash the system. And of course, the public is quite frightened by this, and they are very easy to scare and manipulate, and this is what Wall Street knows. So Obama basically is being held hostage by a bunch of financial terrorists, as I've said many times before, and so far no one has come on this show to refute that charge. In the 2 years I've made that charge, no one from Washington has come on the show from the Adam Smith Institute or any other think tank to refute those charges, because they know that they are terrorists, and they're much worse than anyone else out there from any so-called extremist camp. They're the terrorists.
Okay, well, Mr. Foote, now we continue to hear news that the United States' economy is recovering, and with official unemployment rates almost at 10%, and when counting those who are underemployed, the figure is closer to 20%. What kind of recovery is this? And if it's not in a state of recovery, how is the administration allowed to get away with even saying that it is?